A very good evening to everyone. Well, it's evening in Bombay at this point in time. We are shooting this video. My name is Anansh Prasad and I'm the Secretary General for TIMUN 2014. TIMUN is of course the Model United Nations conference that is taking place as a part of Techfest, Asia's largest technical festival, being conducted in one of the world's most prestigious colleges, the Indian Institute of Technology, Bombay. Well, that was for the introduction. Now, the reason for really shooting this entire video is, the fact that a lot of first-time MUNers are going to be coming to Techfest MUN, TIMUN rather, and well, you guys really need to know the procedure that is followed in MUN. It is not really tough, but well, there are certain specifics which need to be kept in mind, which make debate a lot more free-flowing and easy to follow in general, right? Apart from this, we have a lot of our friends, a lot of our delegates who are going to be coming over for TIMUN from all over the world. We have registrations at this point in time from Tunisia, from Afghanistan, Indonesia, Bangladesh and so many other countries, and we are sure all of you all will join us, logistic constraints notwithstanding. And if you all are coming, I'm sure you will be munning, you would have munned in your own country. However, the fact is that when we shift from country to country, in fact city in India too, well, there are certain variations that take place in MUN procedure. So I thought I'd rather acquaint you all too with the procedure, and I suggest that you all also go through this entire e-workshop of sorts, a virtual MUN workshop. And I'm very happy to be conducting it. I have conducted a video of this sort for Mumbai MUN 2013 too. And a lot of first-time delegates got to gain from it, and I hope you guys get to gain from this too. So before I really go into the UNA USA procedure with the slight variations as I talked about, I would like to acquaint all the first-time delegates and all the other enthusiasts and prospective MUN enthusiasts. A lot of people actually watch MUN conferences taking place and they really want to become a part of the MUN bandwagon. And I really encourage you all to be a part of it, because I've been a part of MUNs for over 10 years now, and it's been a fulfilling experience to say the least. So a lot of you all who would probably want to MUN are first-time delegates. It is quintessential that you all understand the structure of the United Nations, because at the end of the day, an MUN is a simulation of the United Nations, right? So to start off with, of course, the United Nations is probably the biggest body. It is rather the biggest international body. It has 193 member nations that form a part of it. It has various different committees responsible for performing different responsibilities to ensure the development and growth of the world as a whole and to maintain international peace and security. Of course, apart from this, when we talk about development, we talk about economic development, social development and various other kinds of developments. And just like any other huge body on a local, national or international level, the United Nations also has various organs. Now we will be discussing the various organs. Of course, we probably know of some of them: the United Nations Security Council, the General Assemblies. These are things that we really study in our 8th, 9th and 10th grade history books or civics books. And well, we are going to be discussing these in further detail. And there are some of these committees that are going to be simulated as a part of TIMUN, and I will be paying a lot more emphasis on them. Obviously, it is close to impossible for me to cover almost every single committee in the United Nations, because I think at last count there were more than 100 sub-organs, and new organs continuously get mandated for formation by the UNSC. So we will be starting off with basically the committees that form a part of TIMUN 2014. So without further ado, the first committee, and probably in my belief one of the most important committees in the United Nations, is the United Nations Security Council. It is also the most powerful body that forms a part of the United Nations. It has 15 member nations at any point in time. Its primary responsibility is to ensure international peace and security. Alright, international peace and security of the world. So if there is any issue between two member nations that threatens to spiral out of control and affect international peace and security as a whole, the United Nations Security Council generally intervenes. Apart from this, the United Nations Security Council has the power to intervene and discuss any possible issue that it might deem a possible threat to international peace and security. Let's take the example of even a financial threat, let's say the Euro debt crisis. I mean, if the United Nations Security Council believes that that kind of an agenda, that kind of an issue might affect stability of the world, it can discuss it. Now, the United Nations Security Council has 5 permanent member nations, right? This is something that a lot of us would have probably heard about. It is the United States of America, the United Kingdom, France, the Russian Federation, and the People's Republic of China, PRC. These are the 5 permanent member nations, and they have this special power which we also refer to as the veto power, right? So what they are entitled to, which according to me, and well, it's a personal opinion, is slightly unfair. So what they are only entitled to is, if there is any formal document, I'll come to formal documents in course of time, but if there is any formal document related to any agenda, let's take the example of the issue of Kashmir. Let's say there is a formal document that is going to be passed in the United Nations Security Council discussing possible solutions to end the conflict between India and Pakistan, right? If all the 15 member nations of the Security Council think of these possible solutions and frame it, and even if there is a majority of the member nations, 2/3 of the member nations voting in favor of that kind of formal document, even if a single one of these permanent 5, the P5 member nations, even if a single one of these disagrees with it, they have the authority to veto, right? They have the motion to veto, and if they veto, it simply means that the draft resolution of the formal document fails, right? Even if there is a 2/3 majority. So they have that power, right? Which entitles them to disagree and ensure that the rest of the world also does not follow something that they disagree with in the United Nations, right? So this is a special power, the veto power. It is something that is unique only to the United Nations Security Council. Now, apart from these 5 permanent member nations, the remaining 10 member nations have a 2-year tenure, right? So what happens is that from the remaining 188 member nations of the United Nations, 10 member nations keep getting selected to be a part of the UNSC, alright? This happens on a rotation basis, and everybody has a 2-year tenure. So if we really discuss agendas that would be discussed in the UNSC, you could take the issue of Kashmir, the issue of Kosovo, for example. You could also take the issues of Afghanistan, Iraq rather. And in modern times, of course, the Arab Spring, recent times rather, the Arab Spring is one of the raging issues that is discussed in the UNSC. The UNSC, of course, is going to be simulated in TIMUN, and the agendas for discussion are the situation in Nigeria and curbing violence resulting out of restructuring of Arab Spring member nations, right? So what is really happening is that there is a lot of unrest in Libya, Yemen, Syria, and various other member nations, and these are the kinds of issues that might affect international peace and stability, security. There are possibilities of extremist factions also asserting their supremacy in these sections of the world. So these things really are a possible threat, which is why they are discussed in the UNSC, right? It is a committee which in an MUN has only 15 members. So generally the most competent delegates participate in this. They are slightly more experienced as well, and discussions are often at another level altogether, right? Now we move from the United Nations Security Council to the United Nations General Assembly, right? The United Nations General Assembly is, as the name suggests, the assembly of the world. So all 193 member nations have a representation in the UNGA, the United Nations General Assembly, right? The UNGA has various different sub-organs as well. There are 6 main subcommittees, alright? We are going to be simulating 2 of them at TIMUN 2014. And each one of these subcommittees has to perform a specific responsibility. It might be related to demilitarization or economic and financial issues, social and humanitarian issues, or various other issues, right? We'll come to them, right? And all 193 member nations, as I stated, have a representation, and they have it in each one of these subcommittees as well, alright? There is no member nation that has any veto power. All member nations are permanent, and all the discussions that take place, all the formal documents that are passed in the UNGA, they are then forwarded to the UNSC as well, right? Which takes the final decision on a lot of them. So we'll discuss the UNGA committee by committee, and I'll be paying more emphasis on the 2 committees that are going to be simulated at Techfest International United Nations 2014. Alright? The first committee is the DISEC. The full form of the DISEC is the Demilitarization and Security Affairs Council, right? That's the DISEC. As the name would suggest, the responsibility of the DISEC is to promote disarmament, demilitarization, denuclearization, and also ensure security of the world. So basically a lot of issues that would be discussed in the DISEC would center around denuclearization of a particular member nation, One of the member nations that's always under discussion happens to be the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, otherwise known as North Korea. Also the denuclearization of Iran, demilitarization of the Arctic Circle. There are issues of this sort, as well as the issue of foreign base camps, alright, foreign military camps in various parts of the world, in Afghanistan, Iraq. These are the kinds of issues that are really discussed in the dissect, right? The agendas that we have and are going to be discussed as a part of TIMUN 2014 are the demilitarization of the Arctic Circle. It has been a raging issue for a lot of years now. The United States of America, Finland, the Russian Federation and various other member nations have been involved in this. Apart from this, arms trafficking in South America, that is another major topic under discussion, right? So the dissect, I believe everybody would have understood, deals with demilitarization. So all delegates who wish to be a part of dissect have to really base their research in relation to the same. The second committee of the United Nations General Assembly, it's called the United Nations General Assembly Second Committee, or the ECOFIN. The full form of ECOFIN is the Economic and Financial Affairs Committee. It deals with economic and financial issues. I will not delve further into it as it is not a part of TIMUN 2014. The third committee of the UNGA is popularly known as the SOCHM, or the United Nations General Assembly Third Committee. The full form is the Social, Cultural and Humanitarian Affairs Committee, right? The SOCHM. As the name would suggest, social, cultural and humanitarian affairs are discussed and various issues related to the death of languages. A lot of ancient and indigenous languages are unfortunately being lost as a result of the progress of English across the world. These kinds of issues are discussed. Rights of women, empowerment of children, education of children in parts of Africa that have been struck by war. These are the kinds of issues that are discussed in the SOCHM. We'll come to the fourth committee, the United Nations General Assembly Fourth Committee, that is also a part and is being simulated in TIMUN 2014. It is also called the SPECPOL. The full form of the SPECPOL is the Special Political and Decolonization Committee. Right? Now this is a decently technical committee according to me, and it really deals with issues related to autonomous territories across the world, colonized territories and territories that are often disputed between two or more member nations of the UN. So an issue such as the issue of Kashmir, because Kashmir is a disputed territory since 1947. The issue of Kashmir would probably be an issue that you'd commonly be seeing discussed in the SPECPOL. Even the issue of Kosovo or the issue of the Western Sahara. The Western Sahara is of course the biggest autonomous territory in the world. So these kinds of issues that are often discussed in the SPECPOL. As far as TIMUN 2014 is concerned, we will be discussing the status of the Western Sahara, right? It is a region that is at this point in time disputed between Algeria and Morocco, and the Polisario Front of course wants to start off a new member nation altogether called the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic. So well, this was as far as the status of the Western Sahara is concerned. This is the first agenda under discussion. The second agenda under discussion is the status of autonomous and disputed territories in South Asia, like Kashmir, Arunachal Pradesh and the line of actual control between India and China. So as you see, these are the kinds of agendas that will be discussed at TIMUN 2014 in the SPECPOL. You only need to get slightly technical, all you delegates who want to be a part of the SPECPOL, and delve into the history of the entire issue as well as the legal status based on the claims of the different member nations. A very good convention to read in this relation would probably be the Montevideo Convention. It states down the different contents under which a particular autonomous territory can be declared a nation and the different bases on which a particular member nation can claim a particular territory as well. But you're going to have to research a lot more, and luckily we have a wonderful team at TIMUN, a wonderful research team at TIMUN 2014, which is going to be coming up with comprehensive study guides for your reference, right? So this was as far as the fourth committee is concerned. The fifth committee is called the Budgetary Committee, alright? Obviously it sets the budget for different affairs related to the United Nations for different agendas as well, right? And the sixth committee is the Legal Committee. Now it basically frames different forms of international law or passes recommendations in relation to the same. So at this point in time we have discussed the United Nations Security Council as well as the United Nations General Assembly. There are, as I said, a lot of other committees under the United Nations. We are going to be discussing the different committees being simulated at TIMUN, right? One of these committees is the UNHRC. Once again, a very popular committee that you'll probably see in most MUNs, right? Most pure MUNs, traditional ones. The full form of the UNHRC is, of course, the United Nations Human Rights Council, right? As the name would suggest, the UNHRC deals with issues related to human rights violations and the rights of different sections of society across the world, right? So probably issues related to genocide in Rwanda or the human rights violations against Tamils in Sri Lanka. These are the kinds of issues that would be discussed in the UNHRC, right? There are hundreds of these kinds of issues. So most committees in the UN, of course, use this document, which is the United Nations Charter, the UN Charter, as the basis for all their activities, for all their decisions, for all their discussions. Apart from this document, the United Nations Human Rights Council has another very important document that it uses as a basis. It is called the UDHR, or the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Unfortunately, I do not have a document of that sort at this point in time, but we will be providing it to all the delegates who become a part of TIMUN 2014 and become a part of the conference and come to it, right? Alright. The issues that are going to be discussed in the UNHRC, or rather the agendas, are the issue of genocide and ethnic cleansing, right? A very raging topic since time immemorial. And the second topic is the issue of human trafficking in Southeast Asia. Now, of course, human trafficking has been an issue that has affected Southeast Asia. A lot of women are forcefully sent to various parts of the Middle East and across the world. And human trafficking is an issue that we need to solve on an immediate basis. So we request all the delegates who are going to be a part of the UNHRC to go through the study guides in detail and do their research apart from whatever is written in the study guides to ensure that they come perfectly well prepared for the committee. Now, the fifth committee that is being simulated is the UNDP. The full form of the UNDP is the United Nations Development Program. Alright, this is a committee that was to an extent specifically formed in order to ensure that the Millennium Development Goals So there are various Millennium Development Goals, were a set of goals which the UN wanted to ensure are fulfilled in all member nations, all 193 of them, and it is the responsibility of the United Nations Development Program, it is the responsibility of this committee to ensure that they are fulfilled. So they have to ensure, the UNDP has to ensure that there is sustained development in all these member nations apart from these MDGs being fulfilled, right? So generally the topics are quite development centric, right? They are general topics, and a lot of first time delegates wish to be a part of the UNDP for the simple reason that, well, since they are very generalized, it becomes a lot easier to think of possible solutions and come up with formal documentation. So the agendas that are going to be a part of UNDP at TIMUN 2014 are firstly, deliberating on the necessity and viability of heavy investments into projects like the Higgs boson particle. Of course, the Higgs boson particle, the God particle, was one of the most monumental discoveries as believed in science. But one of the major obstacles that the world is facing post its discovery is how to apply it in various parts of normal life, in various industries as well. And the question really is whether we should be investing such heavy funds into development of these kinds of projects as well as sustained progress of these kinds of projects, right? So this is what we really want to discuss as a part of the first agenda. The second agenda is constructive actions to reduce the impact of electronic waste on the environment. Now this is going to be a major issue that the next generation, probably the generation after ours, is going to face. Electronic waste is going to be a major source of pollution, environmental pollution, and we need to take actions now itself, just like we need to take actions to preserve oil and other non-renewable resources for the world. We need to ensure that we take constructive actions to reduce the impact of electronic waste too, right? So these are the two topics, as you would notice, they're quite general in nature, that are going to be discussed in the UNDP. The sixth and the final committee that forms a part of TIMUN 2014 is what you would call a special committee, right? It is a simulation of a committee which really does not form a part of the United Nations, but we are going to be discussing the issues in this committee under the UNA-USA procedure itself. Of course, there are various procedures which differ to an extent, but we will be talking about them in the study guide. So as far as this committee is concerned, it is called the ICES, alright? The full form of the ICES is the Indian Committee for Economic and Social Reforms, right? This is an India-centric committee. It is probably something that would not really appeal to the international delegates, and we at TIMUN believe that apart from simulating committees that discuss issues related to the rest of the world, we must have something related to India itself too, because there are a lot of issues in India, and a lot of us delegates who participate in MUNs would love to come up with constructive solutions for the same as well, right? So the ICES is a committee that has been formed for the very purpose, right? It's something that is very close to my heart because this is something that I have worked on along with the TIMUN team a lot, and we hope to make this committee a big success. And in fact, I would encourage a lot of the first-time delegates to come and be a part of this committee, because a lot of you first-time delegates believe that you are at a lower level than the more experienced ones, simply because they know procedure a lot better. Although I disagree with this, but nonetheless a lot of you all believe so. In the ICES, all of you all will be at the same footing, or rather on the same footing, right? So this will make things much easier for you guys. The first agenda that forms a part of the ICES is effective steps to protect the national markets. As all of you all will be well aware, the national markets have suffered a lot. Our manufacturing industries especially have suffered a lot due to cheaper rates being offered in various other member nations. Apart from this, since FDI and retail has been allowed recently, a lot of hue and cry has been taking place across India for various reasons, and coming up with a comprehensive, constructive and universally acceptable solution for this issue is what we endeavour to do as a part of the ICES and this agenda. The second agenda under discussion is measures to prevent caste and community driven political propaganda, right? Now this is again a very, very popular agenda as far as Indians are concerned, especially considering April 2014 would be when the national elections are going to be taking place. So when political propaganda is going to be of paramount importance for all political parties, well, but caste and community driven political propaganda has been something that has affected India since independence itself, right? It has resulted in riots across various parts of our country. Most recently, of course, the Muzaffarnagar riots, and these issues really need to be stemmed at the source itself, and measures to prevent caste and community driven political propaganda, in our belief, would totally solve the issue altogether, right? So we expect all the delegates who become a part of the ICES to research well on these agendas as well, and come fully prepared to come up with comprehensive solutions related to this India-centric committee, right? And there's a slight change in procedure which will be discussed in the study guide. I won't be discussing it in detail as a part of this video. We will now be moving on to the second part of this video, which deals with the procedure that will be followed as a part of TIMUN 2014. And before we continue, I'd like to apologize for a couple of places where probably I have repeated a couple of things, and otherwise, well, of course we are cutting the video in parts because, well, I'm speaking impromptu, so it becomes a little difficult at times. We will be moving on to the second set now, or the second part of the video, which is about